episode of Green and Shy with my sidekick, Altan Erdemir. Sorry, Altan. And our guest tonight is Luc Carlin from Seattle, Washington. Luc is the founder of Let's Talk Cannabis. It's another YouTube show on the cannabis industry out in Seattle. He's also involved with a company called Spaceweed, which is doing some really interesting things, which we'll talk to Luc about a little bit later. Works in marketing with Sunkissed Cannabis and with Cannagenesis. So Luc, welcome to our show tonight. And Altan, welcome as always. And what do you have to say to start out the week, Altan?
Hello. Thank you, Dan. Luc, thank you for joining us tonight. And as you know, if you're viewing for the first time, Green and Shy is a platform that we built here in Chicago to really spread opportunity. So it's a platform for opportunity to educate, learn about the cannabis industry, whether you're a professional or just getting into the industry, but also opportunities for jobs, trainings. If you're trying to get into the business, what do you need to know? Lawyers, as we have our friend, the cannabis lawyer, Tom Howard, working with us, and all the other aspects that are involved with us. And that's why we have great people like Luc to share their perspective from their angles with the already established markets like Seattle that are kind of our bigger brothers, I could say, as far as the cannabis metropolitan works. And, you know, that's what we're all here about. So I really appreciate you being here with us tonight, Luc. And Dan, I'll let you take it away with the interview.
Well, you know, Luc, it's interesting. Tonight we're going to cover a number of good subjects with you. But for our audience, I want them to know that you're in marketing, branding, and overall business operations for the cannabis industry. And I had the good pleasure of connecting with you on LinkedIn a while back. We started talking, and I felt that it'd be great to have you on the show because I think you have a lot of great information to share with our audience. And so why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Luc, and what you've been doing with your show to start out, and then basically some of the things you're interested in for the industry.
Thank you guys so much for having me, by the way. I love what you guys are doing and building. This is a really awesome platform. So I started out in marketing and branding. I now have a YouTube show called Let's Talk Cannabis LMC. And you know, in that show, I talk about a wide variety of different topics. I'm still kind of figuring out, you know, what specific avenue do I want to take? What do I want to focus on really? But it all interests me so much that I like to cover it all. I mainly cover the business, politics, entrepreneurship, marketing, branding side, not really the growing side. But so that's kind of what I've been up to lately. Obviously, still working with these other cannabis companies and helping them try to succeed in this new market.
So since you like politics, what are some of the politics going on in the Pacific Northwest right now? Washington, Oregon, California, Vancouver, over the border?
I mean, the politics, you know, I've tried not to get too political, but if we're talking about just, you know, cannabis politics,
that's all we care about.
Yeah.
That's all we care about. You got it.
You know, right now, you know, we'll talk obviously, I think a little bit more about this later on, but you know, the Washington cannabis market is a really unique one. It's one where there's no vertical integration allowed. So a dispensary owner cannot also own a producer processor. And so there's a lot of politics around that because all of the power is with the retailers, right? Because the only place you can buy is from a retail shop. There's no delivery. And so these producer processors, the people growing the cannabis, you know, there's a lot of, they're kind of gatekeepers, these retailers. So there's a lot of politics around that. And, you know, there's definitely some retail dispensaries that are fighting back a little bit to keep it that way, not allow for vertical integration. So it's just a power dynamic with anything though.
It is. I've been out to some conferences put on by Marijuana Venture Magazine and Greg James, who we had on 2 weeks ago. And it was really interesting, the dynamic there, as far as there's so many growers, they can't get into all the dispensaries. The dispensaries really do hold the keys to the kingdom in this industry out there, which it makes it difficult for a good grower if he's got a great product to get in, doesn't it? And how are they coping with that in the industry out there?
Yeah,
have that problem.
Yeah, and this is kind of where I kind of came in, and I with the marketing and branding is I've been really trying to tell all of these amazing growers out there that, you know, your product has a ceiling, right? Because if let's say you're growing indoor, you're a master grower, you've been doing it for years and years, well, that hits a ceiling, right? There's going to be other product out there that is just as good. What doesn't have a ceiling though is your marketing and branding and your outreach and your, how do you successfully communicate with your customers directly and get that feedback and continue to build brand equity, continue to build customer loyalty. And so growers, they really need to, look at how am I distinguishing myself? How am I, like I said, connecting with the end consumer and the retail stores as well. That's a big part of it.
Luke, what's an example of a company that might be doing it right in your minds? Like someone that you've seen, obviously in Seattle, I'm sure you guys have much more experienced people out there, established and everything. But what's an example of a company that you like that's doing everything right? Just as an example.
Yeah, I would say a couple brands I could throw out there. I don't know if your audience or if you guys will be aware of them.
Everyone's gonna Google them afterwards. It's all
yeah,
right.
Yeah, definitely. Well, one is, I would say, Smoky Point, which is a little bit more of a corporate company. But they have done a really good job of offering a lot of different products. And there's also a difference too. I want to distinguish this. There is a big difference between connecting with customers and connecting with the retailers. There's a big difference there. And right now the game is connect with the retailers. But what the end game should be is connecting with the customers, especially when you want to go national and be a multi-state operator. Mm-hmm. Another brand that I really like is Subdued Excitement. And Subdued Excitement, they are a really, really good indoor craft cannabis brand. Really, really awesome strains. Really good growers, really good people too. Really, really humble people, and I really like what they're doing. And so Smoky Point and Subdued Excitement are two very different brands, but they're both doing really, really well. Another one I would throw out there is Fat Panda. Now, Fat Panda, what they've done really well is their operations.
I've heard about them.
Yeah, they're pretty big now, and I think in the future they'll be selling their standard operating procedures. They'll be selling a lot of their different processes that they've developed because they've been so successful, in the state. But all three, Smoky Point, Subdued Excitement, and Fat Panda, they've been successful in three different ways. And Fat Panda is much more of like, they've got like 10 different brands. They have the highest quality for the best price. They have really good relationships with retailers. And so, yeah. And then I would throw one more out there is Zaz Cannabis. And Zaz Cannabis is more similar to the Subdued Excitement brand, where Zaz is a small group of old school medical growers. And they grow in an old school way. Indoor cannabis, super, super top-notch quality. They got their branding done by Wick and Mortar, Jared Mirsky. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's a pretty prominent character out of Washington. I know him pretty well. He's a good guy, and he definitely knows the branding and marketing aspects of the cannabis industry. So a lot of different roads to success, but it's interesting seeing it. And I would say that Washington is by far, in my opinion, the hardest market to succeed in because of the lack of vertical integration.
No, what I like about that is it shows that there's different procedures to all be successful as long as you have everything planned out and that's your message. Like you're sticking to your mission, it sounds like, whether you're more corporate or on the down to earth side. It really allows you to be creative, but it's the consistency that matters.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's definitely a good way to put it. Yeah.
So how did the cannabis brands out in Washington, Oregon, or even around the country build brand equity, in your opinion, Luke?
Yeah. So brand equity, it's something that's starting to be talked about a lot more in the industry. What brand equity really is, and one of the main measurements for brand equity is customer loyalty. How do you have somebody come into the store repeatedly and know exactly they want your brand? Well, that is through, that's through brand equity. And to achieve brand equity, you can do a lot of different things. And we can look at different case studies for this. One way is you could leverage celebrity, you could leverage music, right? So one example comes to mind is Cookies Cannabis. Mm-hmm. very, very popular brand. And it was created by this rapper named Burner. Somebody, and this brand specifically, I study quite a bit. And I've kind of come to a conclusion, and he's talked about this before, but he has a 3-prong marketing technique. He uses music, which helps make the strains and the brand cookies, the cannabis brand, very famous. And then the cannabis brand, you know, that success goes into the clothing company, and the clothing company is almost a $50 million company, I believe, just by itself. Wow. And it's just a feedback loop, and it keeps feeding into each other. And so that's one way. I mean, and that really is, you know, you're leveraging celebrity, you're leveraging music. You know, you have Snoop Dogg talking about strains, or you have, you know, whoever, right? And that's the more obvious. That's another obvious kind of way. Another way is to create a whole new offering for the customer, a whole new technology or a whole new experience. And that could be achieved through, like we talked about, Darren, a little bit before this, is about space weed, and that unique curing technology and how it differentiates itself from the rest of the pack. And so the key to it really, though, in my opinion, is differentiating yourself and telling your story in a unique, you know, and intriguing way. You know, and there's a lot of other ways to achieve brand equity, but when you're looking at the companies right now that are going out, like Cookies is one of the very few that are going out into other states now and licensing their brand out. That's because of how much that's because of how much brand equity they have and how much cultural equity as well.
So another question I would have is, with this social equity, how important is it in Washington at this time?
So you're talking social equity? Like,
yes.
Yeah, it's very big here in Chicago. I mean, every major company, I know Cresco has a whole department called Seed, which is their whole social equity side, and there's training, and I don't know if it's as prevalent as in Seattle, but I know that, you know, even on the applications here, there's certain requirements for past convictions and things like that.
Yeah, 100%. And there's definitely quite a bit of that. You know, you could also call it like cause-based marketing. So you're raising money for a cause and, you know, contributing, you know, name recognition or just doing an event for a cause. 100%. That's definitely being done here. I think the difference is there is the marketing tactic of using a cause, right, to help that cause, and then also have that residual, you know, bounce back onto the brand. But then there's also the social equity programs, right, that we see in a couple of different states. I don't know if they have them in Illinois. I think they do, right?
Yeah, that's
like only like 100 licenses have to go to, you know, a certain demographic and so forth. And I know people have, you know, kind of, there's been some frustration with those because people find that loophole and that gets corrupted. But for the most part, though, yeah, I think that's a great way to market and reach out to customers and show that, you know, as a cannabis brand, you care about this certain issue, or you care about, you know, helping the community better itself and being a positive contribution to that. So yeah, it's definitely being out here. Yeah.
I have a question that's in that bucket. It's a little bit different. I'm just curious as to how Seattle might have handled it, because here, the social equity issue, there's a lot of good applicants, a lot of people with good business plan, but a lot of people that don't want to fund it or invest in it. It's hard for them to come up with the requirements to meet the funding. I don't know if there was something that the social equity applicants in Seattle did that might have helped them achieve that, or if you guys even saw that same issue.
Yeah, so I don't want to speak on the, I don't know for 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that Washington doesn't even have social equity requirements at all. I think a lot of companies, so like, you know, a company like Wick and Mortar that helps companies with branding and marketing, one thing that Jared will say is, you know, he believes that cause-based marketing, helping, you know, a specific issue through cannabis is a good positive marketing tactic, but there isn't any requirements. I think it's like California and a few other states that Illinois is one. And I think they're really positive. They just need to have the right checks and balances on them and make sure that there's a guiding factor that makes people, not only people don't take the loophole, you know, some white guy comes to, you know, a person of color and goes, I'll just fund this, you just be the front. Right, that's like the basis of the whole argument against it. I just think there needs more checks and balances for that. But yeah,
it's not 645 yet. But that company you keep mentioning, Anatolia, it's Wick and Mortar. Can you give those details. Is it wick and mortar, brick and mortar?
Yeah, sorry. Wick and mortar. So it's like brick and mortar, but it's wick and mortar.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go, Anatoly.
Yeah.
So Luke, I have another question for you. What are some of the problems you see from Washington with a multi-state operator in the cannabis industry? The need for economy to scale, fragmented markets. Could you touch on all of those? Because I think they're really interesting, and I think we're seeing issues with that all over the country from all MSOs in all states that are expanding. Love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. So the problem, so a lot of, and this is a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing for small businesses right now. But a very wealthy individual or a wealthy company, there are very few that are actually investing into cannabis right now because there is no economy of scale. And what that means is that there's a fragmented market. So each state that has recreationally legalized adult use cannabis, it has its own whole set of procedures, right? So specifics around packaging guidelines, around whether or not a retailer can own a producer processor. So what makes it so difficult is you need to have a customized procedure and strategy in each state. And so let's say you're like Willie's Reserve, which I think is in like eight states, right? They have to have 8 different strategies, 8 different completely different customized attacks on, or procedures for each of those states. So way more money, less simplified, really complicated, can go wrong very easily. One state could be doing really well and another state could be doing terribly. And from just one company looking at that, it can be really tough. It can be really, really tough. And so one thing that I've been always saying is I don't think companies should really rush into being a multi-state operator, especially if they're not ready for it, obviously. But I would say, especially for some of these Canadian cannabis companies, or regardless of who it is. Like, for example, there's a company called True Leaf in Florida, right? And True Leaf has done really, really well with the medical market there. They've gotten really good at what they do in this one market. And the big thing that a lot of executives of these really big cannabis companies don't get, I think, is the regulations is only going to let you go as far as the regulations let you go. And sitting back, getting really good at everything you want to do in this one market, and then being ready for when not federal legalization occurs or whatever the right timing is, I think is the right strategy for most companies.
And it's also kind of indicative to the big taxes we pay in certain states for that as well. I mean, if you look at this, they're doing all this so that they can operate in a state legal atmosphere as opposed to a federal. So, there's also the fact that when things do open up, it's going to be, I mean, there's already talks about the Federal Banking Act, so there's a lot of change that's going to happen. But I also think that without this, they kind of print their own money because of the demand right now. I mean, they can't even meet up with the demand. So it's kind of nice to understand this and see how hard it is. So not everybody can just enter the market. There has to be some kind of barriers.
Yeah, definitely. 100%.
Quality, especially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Luke, I have another question for you. If cannabis were federally legalized in 6 months from now, would it be a good thing? Or how about for smaller business or larger businesses? Who would benefit the most from that?
Yeah. So I always thought, the last year I was talking to somebody and they brought up this whole conversation about actually for most small businesses, if it were to federally legalize, it would not be good at all. It would actually put us all out of business, right? The thing about a fragmented market is, because I talked about just previously in that last question, talking about how there's reasons why there aren't a lot of billionaires, there aren't a lot of really big companies coming in and trying to invest right now, and it's because there's no economy of scale. Mm-hmm. And so the fragmentation of the markets actually serves as protection and allows more time for smaller businesses to get a grip, to get their roots down, and to give them the ability. Obviously, for a larger company that has tons and tons of money to burn, they obviously, that would be better for them, right? So for the companies that I work with too, which are majority, pretty small to medium, federal legalization it would not be good if it were to happen within this year. The thing is, though, is there's a lot of things connected to it, right? Whether it be, the disproportionate amount of people getting incarcerated for cannabis, right? There's all these other residual things that are connected to the federal legalization of cannabis. But from a business standpoint and for a small business standpoint, the lack of federal legalization actually serves as protection. And I feel bad for some of the people in the states that aren't gonna legalize before federal legalization, because those companies, they're not gonna have even a chance to start up. So yeah.
That was a good answer to that. I'm also curious, how many MSOs are there in Washington that are in multiple states? Do you know that number by any chance, Luke?
I don't know that number. I think there's more and more starting to come in. There's more and more. I have some people that have told me that they're getting offers right now from some companies to come in and inquire them. But like I said, Washington is just the hardest market to succeed in. So a lot of these MSOs, these multi-state operators, they haven't really felt like there's a need to come to this market. Yeah. So, and like, for example, what makes sense for an MSO to come into Washington? Well, maybe a company like Have a Heart, like we were talking about just before this, which Have a Heart, if you're unaware about them, they're a multi-state operator, but they focus mainly on retail. So because the retailers have all the power in Washington, it makes sense for Have a Heart to come in. Does it make sense for a multi-state operator that's a brand or produce processor? Maybe. I mean, kind of, but it's a whole different world up here in Washington compared to California, Nevada, pretty much all the other states.
Yeah, I would say there's a lot more products on the shelves in Washington than I've seen in any other state, even including Oregon and California. I mean, it's just the stores are bustling, especially the one we were just talking about. I mean, you go in their door. Is it the company you just mentioned? I've been in their dispensary.
Yeah, Have a Heart. Have a Heart.
And they have very knowledgeable people meeting you at the door, asking your needs, and they can just take you right to where you want to go very well.
I could just only imagine what it would be like when Chicago's finally there. I mean, right now, people are still waiting in line for 2 hours to not even get a pre-rolled joint, or, they wait an hour to find out there's no anything left, especially flour. So, I mean, it's interesting. It'd be great to see, how long it took in those other markets for them to catch up. And I don't know if the demand was the same a few years back when you guys opened up, but I know right here they have an issue even being able to offer. I mean, unless it's pens or carts or something of the fancy nature, but none of the flour. I mean, you have to get creative to get your fancy strains like Pink Panther or Strawberry Sherbet and things like that.
Yeah, I think so with Illinois, how many retail stores are there right now? Not very many, right?
But wait, did you say the S at the end first? Of Illinois?
Oh, Illinois, sorry.
I just wanted to make sure.
Sorry. Illinois, excuse me. There aren't many retailers though, right?
There's some big names. There's a group of applications that were to be approved. I mean, you have your Crescos, your Sunnysides, and all these different brands. But I think there's probably about 50 or so that operating throughout Illinois, maybe 75 with the suburbs. But it's just that really, I mean, before the pandemic, I'd go there, and not that I was just curious, because it's always a good place to get certified cards, or if you want the dabs or the diamonds or any of those fancy things, it's always good to get it from a source, especially, with nice things like Mindy's edibles from Cresco and different branded items that are cool. But when it comes to flour, it's just your SOL, and I feel like everyone else, I know even when I visited Vegas or California, you can get whatever you want. You can go to Weed Maps, look up a strain, and find out what dispensary has what you need. And here, I feel like it might take a while. I was just curious to see if that ever was the situation over there. Was it kind of immediately that they met demand of these little things that people needed, or, you know, what the process was there? Just see what we might have to look forward to.
Yeah.
Obviously, things are different if you have the medical card, but, you know, a lot of people just want to be able to walk in and out.
Yeah, no, and that is really interesting. Like really quick, if you look up in Canada, they haven't even, you know, there was at one point about 4 months ago, maybe half a year ago, where there was 50,000 people, 60,000 people for every one retail store.
Wow.
And that's a whole different beast. We don't have to go down that, right? With Canada and how it's not even an economy of scale, even though it's federally legal there. But going back to Seattle or Washington, I'm assuming what they're going to be, you know, obviously every market takes time to mature, and usually with the licensing, they have multiple rounds of licensing. So as of now with Washington, the Liquor and Cannabis Board that regulates cannabis in Washington, they've said that there's no more retail licenses coming out, no more rounds of retail or producer processor licenses out. So it's fully matured. Now I don't know what round you guys are on, and you might be on the second round, maybe, you know, just to simplify it, I guess. But each round is going to dish out more and more, and hopefully you guys keep a limit on it. Obviously, you want as much as you want to have everyone to get access, but you don't want to be like in Oregon where, you know, everyone and their mama and their grandma can go start a recreational store and flood the market. But
it's very interesting here, actually, because there's also kind of the ghost keeping everything in line, because it's Chicago and the hub of a lot of the black market. It's known ever since Al Capone and all that. It's interesting. There's a kind of a dance going on, I would say, because you can get reasonably priced weed, but another 30% tax, another this and that, it adds up. So there's kind of a happy medium between demand going to the dispensaries to get the edibles, the cards, the fancy stuff, and then sticking to the black market here as well. So I presume with all the movies and stories I watched from Vancouver that Seattle still has their black market as well.
It's been destroyed. I'll tell you for sure. Yeah, they've done a great job. I mean, it's just they can't compete. They just can't compete. Now, people sending out cannabis out to the other states, that's a whole different issue, right? That's a different thing. Right. But no, I mean, they're still here and there. You'll see some black market dealers, but they've done the pricing and the accessibility and the quality and the certification of that quality. Mm-hmm. It's destroyed the black market, to be honest. And, you know, I hope, and, you know, some people look at that as a negative thing. Most people look at it as a positive thing. I think it's a necessary thing regardless. Now, if you look at California, holy crap, right? That black market is like last year, there was recorded in California $3.1 billion in cannabis sales. Now, people at MJ Biz, or I don't know who did the estimation, but it's from MJ Biz Daily. They estimated that there was around 10.6 billion in the black market. Yeah, that's more than triple. Yeah, and so that's a whole different beast, right? And I wouldn't even look at California as a regular model for anybody trying to see how they can figure out to get rid of the black market. That is a different beast, and it's crazy.
Yeah, it's all about quality and pricing, because people do want the quality. That's why people still go to the dispensaries for the fancy stuff. But there's a demand for that flower, and it's not being met here in Illinois, that's for sure.
Wow. That's super interesting about the flower. Yeah, I've seen some articles about how you guys sold out like within a day, right? Or 2 days. And it's just been going out crazy. Yeah.
Sold out for a month.
They feel that'll take 6 months to 8 months to catch up, but we'll see. Yeah. You know, let's change the subject here, Luc, because we only have an hour and we're halfway through already. And I'd like to ask you about customizable cannabis, something you and I talked about the other day. What are the implications of terpenes and some of the cannabinoids? And I mean, we both have you have some great views on this that I really enjoyed hearing.
Yeah, I love the conversation that you and me had about this. So, you know, the more education, the more research, the more understanding we get with terpenes and cannabinoids. And I'm just going to focus mainly on terpenes here, even though cannabinoids are extremely important too. But the terpenes, right? You have limonene, you have, all these different terpenes that give you taste, smell, and effect. But effect is the one that really matters. And once we can start to isolate the terpenes, once we can start to understand exactly what a terpene can do in effect, and then we can maybe turn the volume up on that terpene's effect, then we can start to not only customize a high for an individual based on their genome makeup, but we can also allow for specific types of effects to be applied to certain types of activities, and then that activity can be enhanced. But the big thing that I think about with us being able to customize cannabis is it's going to bring back so many people that tried cannabis, 3-4 times, and they were just anxious and their heart was beating and they hated it, right? They had a terrible experience and it turned them off from cannabis forever. Now, the reason why is because a specific, terpene in there and a cannabinoid, those just didn't cope with them well.
Or they ate too much.
Or they ate too much, right? Exactly. Or that too. Yeah, exactly. But if we can consistently provide and deliver a specific type of effect and high, then we've just blown, that's the golden goose of industry. We've blown the hinges off the door. Like alcohol is going to be left in the dust, right? Everything, right? It's going to be insane.
Look, that was a good subject too. We were talking about that. A lot of people believe that it's just the amount of THC in the cannabis that makes you high. There's a lot to do with terpenes in this case as well. And it's not necessarily that you need the highest level of THC to get the effects if you've got the right terpenes, as you just said. Could you elaborate on that a little bit more for our audience?
Yeah, 100%. So most people, THC percentage, it has very little actual meaning to me in a lot of ways. I'm going to be honest. Somebody could get let's say a 30% THC percentage, and they get really, really high. They could also smoke something that has 25% THC or, whatever the testing says, right? Or maybe let's say 22%. And that high could get you way, way, way higher than that 30% did. It's all based on the individual. It's all based on how we interact with these terpenes. Everyone is different. I just think it's goes back to why the sativa indica hybrid and then like the THC percentage, those are all pretty broad, pretty unnuanced ways of looking at it, and not it's just, and we don't have really any other ways of looking at it right now. We're still figuring that out. But yeah, terpenes can get you, or have so much effect on it, and the THC percentage, you're starting to see more and more in Washington and the more developed markets. People stop like completely stopping to look at, they're not looking at the THC percentage anymore. They're looking at, what terpenes are, rich in this specific strain, and they're looking at the testing, and they're getting a lot more into it. So it's engaging customers, and it's an overall more educated way about looking at cannabis and not just looking at, the percentage is super high. Also too, the testing can be spotty, and you want to look at everything. You don't want to just be looking at the THC percentage.
Absolutely. And it's interesting you brought that up, because I'm sure you're familiar with the company Leafly. They do and Dan, I'm sure you understand, I always promote them. I took a course with them. I got a certification for a bud tending thing. So really felt that I wanted to know everything, right, back in the beginning. So very good descriptions, diagrams, and the cool thing, I use it when I get I'm an exotics hunter. I know you heard me mention Pink Panther earlier. I like my, like right now I have strawberry sherbet. I like to go after the fancy ones.
Exotics. Yep.
Tony will say I had him try some of my peanut butter kush and all these fancy looking stuff. And my favorite thing is going on there, Leafly, and looking up the strain and matching the picture, making sure everything is, and then going to the CBD, the terpenes page, and they'll say, hey, this has this much chlorophyll and pinene, limonene, and then it'll also say it has 1% CBG, and I'm like, oh, this is so cool. You can look into all those things, and I really think that the people that had those bad experiences because they smoked with their friend Frank and he just had a bag of whatever, it's just the best shit, you know, it's Chewbacca's ear because it was hairy looking or whatever he called it, isn't going to get the same as they can now. And it's probably even better in Seattle when you actually have, you know, the lead on the definition, everything separated, the experience. But people can go in there and they teach you to not say, hey, what do you want to feel? It's what mood are you looking for? Because you're absolutely right. It's, you can smoke one thing, sit on your couch, and then smoke that same strain outside of a bar and have a totally different experience because of the energy and the environment. And that 32% might make you fall asleep in one area and might make you energized in another.
Yeah, great. No, 100%. And I think the more time goes by and the more data we get, the more we can start to pair, you know, specific terpenes with specific activities that can help enhance everything, enhance the activity, enhance the high, just to, you know, reiterate what you're saying, 100%. Yeah.
You know, Luke, when we were talking the other day, we touched on a subject of a couple of companies that are doing the sequencing of the DNA of the cannabis plant, both strain print, strain genie, and they're coupling that data and information with information from 23andMe and others that are sequencing the human genome and looking at it, and they're trying to pick the best cannabis that will basically mesh with our body and have the best effect on us possible. Did you want to talk a little about that?
Yeah. And you know, you explained it pretty well there, but you know, everyone's reaction to really anything is different, right? We all have allergies, specific allergies to certain things we may not even know about. You know, it's really like you were talking about when we were talking about the other day, is like it's 23andMe, but for weed, right? And getting an ability to understand what specifically, you know, how do you react specifically to this strain, right? And it's just another piece to the puzzle of this overarching idea of customizable cannabis, you know, for the individual. Yeah.
So another question I have for you is, if you look at the federal legalization of cannabis in the industry, who will end up with the most power once federal legalization occurs, especially in the U.S. market?
Yeah, so this one's an interesting one, and you know, right off the bat, that comes to mind. So, like, once we have a fully mature market, you know, you look at alcohol, right? And I think there definitely are some similarities. There's some parallelisms right there, but there also is there's some big differences. Now, if you look at alcohol, the people that have all the power really is the distributors. If you guys know about Columbia distribution, there's like three big, you know, three major distributors in alcohol, and Columbia is the top dog. And so pretty much they're the equivalent to like the Washington retailers, right? They're the gatekeepers, right? They're the ones that it's going to eventually be where all of these producer processors are bringing their products to a warehouse that's owned by a distributor like Columbia, right? And then Columbia will distribute it all over the country. So, you know, you know, that's a pretty simple way to explain, I guess, the power dynamics, or my prediction of the power dynamics in the future. But the distributors are going to have a lot of power, and whoever can really get to that first, national, has, you know, far-reaching ability to distribute products everywhere. That's really going to be the kingmaker in a lot of ways. Now, I think there is power with brands too, but you know, just a simple overall with that question. Yeah.
You know, Luke, I think InBev is a classic example of what you just talked about because of their investment in canopy growth, and they're set up for distribution worldwide.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, and you know, that also is a good segue into the drinkable market too. Like, I think you're right. I think some of these cannabis companies, you know, like Constellation Brands now is invested, right? Is that InBev, or are they separate? They're separate, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure of that exactly, so I don't want to be wrong.
Yeah. But they're going to use the alcohol distribution, you know, that infrastructure that's already been laid out. You know, I think that's a very fair prediction there. I think that probably will happen. But you know, the beverage market too, that's another thing I would say. The cannabis beverages are going to take over in the future.
Since we're getting close here, I have another question for you that I think I'm really interested in this one myself, and that is, what do you think of the Canadian cannabis companies and their markets and how they're trying to enter into the U.S. market?
Yeah, it's a little bit of the saying, like the first man over the hill gets shot, a little bit, but my broad statement about the Canadian cannabis companies, the big ones, we're all learning, right? We're all learning. You know, there might be a couple markets ahead. You know, maybe Washington, Colorado are a little bit ahead, but not by much. Not by much. Maybe just more maturity in the market. The problem with these Canadian cannabis companies, in my opinion, is they're learning at a multi-billion-dollar level. So when they mess up, they're going to be losing. They're going to mess up at a multi-billion-dollar level. I also, you know, and you see a lot of these CEOs, you know, they're still learning. I just got to reiterate that they're still learning, and they're learning at a multi-billion-dollar level, and they're playing with billions of dollars. And because they were the first country to, you know, legalize federally, or like, you know, one of the bigger, I think Uruguay had legalized before, but regardless, you know, they just took in tons and tons of money. People were throwing money at them, right? And you know, they're gonna obviously take that money. Now, what they've done with that money is they've burnt about most of it, right? They've literally lit it on fire in a lot of ways, in my opinion, right? Because you're still learning all these different, you know, ways to how to actually be in the cannabis industry and make money. It's a hard thing to do. And I think now, because some of these cannabis companies like Aurora Cannabis, a couple other ones, they're really starting to do badly now. It's really started to hurt the international investor confidence, or, you know, so, you know, that's one thing I definitely get a little annoyed about with the Canadian cannabis companies. I understand that, you know, they were the first to really start taking in major investment. And, you know, if you have a lot of money, you're going to tend to waste a lot of money, you know, if you have that ability to, unfortunately.
Luke, before we get into the Q&A here, I got a real quick question here. I know that you're trying to compete with SpaceX and Elon Musk with your company, Space Weed. Can you tell us what you're doing with that? Are you sending weed out to the astronauts? I mean, give us a little, you know, synopsis on the Space Weed. It's
yeah. So we're definitely not competing with Elon. Elon is doing way bigger things than us. And so the founder of Cannagenesis, the creator of Space Weed, his name's Eric Young. Is a mentor of mine. He gave me my first job in the recreational market. But what Space Weed does is it's a showcase brand for this unique curing technology. It's called Flash Frozen Cured. And there's a lot of different benefits for what makes Space Weed and this as the showcase brand for Flash Frozen Cured, what makes it so different. One being, you can cure your cannabis in 18 to 24 hours, where it usually takes 18 days, 15 to 18 days typically to hang dry. That's their traditional way to cure it. So the main process of Flash Frozen Cured is sublimation. It's rapidly extracting moisture content quickly. And the basis of sublimation is you have your solid, liquid, and gaseous forms of water, right? So with Flash Frozen Cured, you freeze it really quick, you turn it into solid, and then you heat it up really quickly, right? And so you skip the liquid phase and it goes straight to gaseous. And then the gaseous, the gaseous water content is then sucked out through low pressure vacuums. So it does so many different things. It preserves the terpenes. It gives the customer more volume because you're not paying for excess water weight. You don't cough at all, right? Because the combustion, what makes you cough is water, right? Also, going back to the terpene preservation, whenever you hang dry something, those 15 to 18 days of hang drying, it typically can start to, you know, deteriorate the bud, right? Because it's taking a long time, and the liquid, it's going through the liquid phase. It's slowly passing the liquid phase, right? Instead of quickly passing the liquid phase. That's really the key, I think, to simplify it. You're trying to get really quickly past the liquid phase and into the gaseous and let it go. With the traditional hang dry, it deteriorates the buds, it deteriorates the terpenes. And you know, I was telling Dan is like, imagine being able to smoke good quality cured cannabis in only a day after harvest, right? No one else can say that. No one.
It's a more expensive process to perform.
Not exactly. I mean, the technology needed, the machinery needed, yes, that can be very pricey. But for the producer processor, that can save a lot of time, save a lot of space. It gives you a lot of variability. You can be like, oh, I wanna keep my stuff frozen for now because I don't have the space or I don't have the amount of output ready for it. I don't have enough stores to sell my product. You know, a lot of problems that happen for the producer processor is time, right? Is the not having enough time, not having enough space. You know, their product goes bad, so they just have to throw it in distillate or, you know, throw it into a processing investment. Another, you know,
investment in refrigeration.
Yes, that might be a little pricey over time, but yeah.
That's interesting. I didn't know that it was the moisture that made me cough so much. It's gotta be only the moisture, right?
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and awesome. And people think that the sticky, you know, making you cough is what makes you high, and that's just not true at all. That's a complete myth. Imagine, you know, whenever you burn wet wood, you know how it usually turns black and it's really hard to smoke, right? That's the same process.
I don't smoke wood that much, but
no, yeah, I know. But when you're like when you're trying to start a fire, right? It's the same principle, right?
Let me ask you though: does the frozen, the freeze dried weed, does it come in the same packages as the freeze dried ice cream that the astronauts?
No.
Good question.
Good question. So what that really is, though, but what that points at is what deteriorates anything, right? It's water or air, right? So if you leave your cannabis hang drying, and I have no problem with hang dried cannabis. I think they're both different things, and I think they're both going to have really, really prominent parts to play. But if you hang dry your weed, you know, you're going to have 15 to 18 days of water slowly getting extracted from it, right, which deteriorates what we talked about, and air, which is also deteriorating the buds.
Well, it's also bringing nutrients with it, and that goes along with the first question of our Q&A from Sergio Lopez. Does it decrease the terpene profile or enhance the terpenes?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So it doesn't enhance, but it preserves, right? So because there's so many rich terpenes already in the buds, right? Through the hanging process, you lose a lot of those terpenes, right? You lose a lot of those nutrients, like you're saying. So what it does is it just preserves. It doesn't add on, but it preserves.
Any other questions, Tony? Let's see.
So let's see here. You want to take that one, Dan? You're a good reader.
I don't see it.
Look on the side. So Kate says, not much has been said on infusion market for Chicago. Since there is a shortage on cannabis flower for dispensaries, what does that mean for the infusion market purchasing in the extracted format? Do craft growers focus on one market versus the other, or do they make more on extract to the infuser market or product solid directly to dispensaries? Or sold directly to dispensaries, sorry.
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit on it. I mean, I'm obviously not as familiar with the Illinois, right? Not Illinois, the Illinois market. But what seems to be for me is that I think because there's less smokable flower being thrown out in the market is because the quality of that flower was not necessarily there. Is that, do you guys think that's right? And that's why it's going into the more processed side of the market, because usually a lot of times the lower quality buds will be put into oil and the other infusion side of the market.
Well, I think one of the focuses, it depends on really the matter of extraction. Is it cold press? Is it a different format? Because you're going to lose a lot of those terpenes either way. It's just a matter of quality of the actual flower in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, but to take a little bit from the space weed side because so live resin oil, right? That is, they use fresh frozen material, which is the same process of making space weed. They use sublimation. So like you were just saying is if they do use the fresh frozen curing method for the processed material, then it could preserve more terpenes for that as well.
Luc, could you tell our audience a little bit more about the composition of the cannabis after it's been dried through the space weed method? I thought this was really fascinating.
Yeah, it is insane. I really wish I had some in front of me that I could like kind of show you guys in the camera, but it's fluffy but dense at the same time. It's like cotton candy. One gram of space weed looks like 2 or 3 grams. It is like alien. It is the weirdest texture. It's awesome. It's awesome. I'm telling you, you gotta try it to, see it to believe it really. But you can just, take it apart with your hands. You can smoke the stem as well, right? Because it's all organic. Another benefit to this curing style for flash rosin cured is it also sterilizes the cannabis, which people don't think may not be as big of a deal. But when you hang dry the cannabis, there's a lot of times there's parasites, there's other, not very, good things to smoke in there. And so, having that be, one of the other benefits of flash rosin curing.
Man, I really wish we had some to show us. I do.
I'll get you some.
I feel like I'm
Luc,
at
you're gonna have to send us some pictures with an app with a little bit of a description, and we'll post it here so
Absolutely.
everybody in Chicago can see it. I think.
Or you could just send me some, and I'll tell everybody about it. How about that?
I won't send you some.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will. I'll send you guys some. I got you guys.
We have another question from Eddie, and that is, what are your thoughts on an interactive kiosk menus advertising on them to go into dispensaries?
So are we referring to like self-serving kiosks, or is?
I believe I'm thinking that it's a menu of advertisements of everything that's on there. Are you finding a kiosk in the dispensaries in Washington or any place you've been that?
Yeah, it's here and there. One thing that actually this kind of reminds me of is somebody that I work with closely for Sunkist Cannabis. We've been developing augmented reality technology. And augmented reality is, if anybody's played Pokemon, the Pokemon Go game, right? But augmented reality is you have, an app on your phone and you put it there and then it shows something, that you can show a figure. So we've been looking at a lot of for advertising through AR and having, somebody download an app and then have the ability to point their camera at the product and then have, let's say, a mascot pop up virtually and explain everything about the product. So what that could do is also not only engage the customer and give a lot more background to the customer about that product and that brand, but it also gives the bud tenders a little time, to make sure, people are still, they have a little bit more time to, if they have a really long line, to be able to serve everyone and not everyone be frustrated. So it can distract some of the customers. I don't know if that necessarily answers that question, but that's just came to mind when that came up.
Yeah,
there's not a lot of kiosks really necessarily. There's some check-in kiosks, but no, not necessarily. No.
I have another question from Altan in our audience. What does the space weed shirt looks like? I don't know. It's totally off topic.
No, you're good. We're good.
I just think that's got to be something kind of cool, like a Star Trek, but with a marijuana leaf or.
Yeah, we're designing some right now. We've got a bunch of different things. I wish I had We just came out with the buffs, like the buffs that people wear, they like wear them on Survivor. We have the Space Weed ones now for like people can cover their face and mouth. I'll send you guys those too in that little pack I send you guys.
I wear a large, and I'll wear it on the show. You
yes,
said
yes.
If you have any hats, I wear a size extra brainy.
I got a big head too. I got a 5 head. Yeah, not a 4 head.
Better than have a little,
cool.
a little one. Anyway, it's been, let's see, is there anything else you'd like to cover with us tonight, Luc?
A
question we might have missed, which is possible, that you'd have, that's of interest to you that you think our audience would love to hear about.
I would say, I guess it's not really, it's just something I throw out there is once we federally legalize, or once the conversation before federal legalization occurs, we need to be ready to make sure that it's not completely controlled by corporations, by people that don't care about cannabis. We need to make sure that everyone has a voice at the table, and that everyone for the most part gets an equitable share out of it. Because if we were to rush legalization and we let the corporations take control of it, it's going to screw a lot of these small businesses, a lot of these OG growers, a lot of the people that, sacrificed for a young person like myself to be able to come here and, talk about cannabis and the legal cannabis industry. So I would just throw it out there is that as, more and more states legalize and the closer we get to federal legalization, there's going to be a lot more corporate, voices in the mix. And we just need to make sure, and corporate, we need to have corporations and corporatizing cannabis. It needs to happen, but it also needs to help the people that sacrificed for us in the past. I'm just throwing that out there, and it's a pretty broad topic, but it's something that I do care about a lot.
I do too, and I'd like to elaborate on that. I was talking with the CEO of one of the major multi-state operators from Illinois. And basically, he just said, in the end game, it's really to have the brand established in as many markets as we can and still survive, because the margins are going to shrink down to really small amounts. That's why when you talked earlier about the industry having difficulties ahead, and it's not easy to make money in this unless you've got good business people. That's why there's going to be an effort to hire better people in this industry, and people that come out of the industries they're going through, like beverage and distribution and logistics and quality control. I mean, it's just like any other corporation. It's just your corporate farming cannabis. That's really the difference. But in the end, when this does become big and those large multinationals jump into this market, whether it's food and beverage or former cigarette companies, whatever, I think you're going to see that people will sell out for money, and there will be issues we probably all don't like in the end, but it's probably going to be a reality that we have to live with, not that we have to like it. And maybe they'll get the message and realize people don't want things that are changed to the point where it does damage to the, to your health.
And going along that, I completely agree. And it's very interesting because here you have a product that is a drug, a food, and an industrial material. And there's no one way to use it. If you can't use it for this, if you're growing hemp for CBD and it comes in hot and is too high, guess what? You can take all that and make anything you want with it. Plastic, hempcrete, whatever you want. You can still try to do other things with it. There's so many universal applications for these, and that's what's going to make it very difficult because there's no one way to do things. And until, everyone realizes that, and that's why I think this is a very interesting market, not just on the financial markets or the commercial side, but there's always going to be that cultural side, that heart that for the last 70 years since they've been banning it, haven't been able. And it's those guys, whether you call them hippies, whether you call them cannabis aficionados like myself, or community consultants, or whatever you want to call it. But those are the people that are going to make sure that those corporations aren't going to take control. Yes, they're going to win. They win in everything.
They always win,
on a financial standpoint, but that doesn't mean that everyone's going to buy from them, right? They're going to win on an economies of scale.
100%. It doesn't mean that everyone has to lose besides the corporations. And the corporations are necessary. I just think that, the corporations do have a little bit of obligation to help bring those people along as well and put them to work. not just, give free handouts or anything, but
It's
So
like let
tonight-
them build the roads and we'll
Yeah.
build our own cars.
100%.
Saul, are we winding it up tonight?
I
wanna
think
just-
we should, and I'll say my buys and I'll let you say your goodbyes. I think this is a great show. I appreciate everyone joining us. A little project that we're doing at Green and Shy, a little side. If you guys work with dispensaries, have connections with people that own dispensaries, people that have applications in place to hopefully own dispensaries, we want to hear from you. I have my email on the side here. Send me an email. Let's have a discussion. We want to do some projects, especially if you're local, nationwide. It doesn't matter. We got a little dispensary project we're trying to get going on while we're all digital here. So I'll let you take it and close it up from there, Dan.
Thanks, Altan. Have a great week. And Luc, I want to thank you for being on tonight. It was really great having you. It was a great interview. I really think you have a lot of depth and a lot to offer. We would like to hear more about Space Weed. Maybe one of these times we can have Eric.
I'll bring on Eric. Yeah.
And I would love to hear this because it's so different from anything that I've seen in the market so far. So it's very interesting. Thank you again for being on, being our guest. I think our audience really enjoyed having you, as I know Altan and I did. And so it's another wrap for this week. And next week, we're going to have Jackie Cohen-Roth on, and it'll be really interesting because we're going to talk the medical side of cannabis. So everyone, thanks for tuning in tonight. We appreciate you as an audience. We'd love to hear from you, as Altan said, on not just those things, but anything you have an interest in that we might be able to offer to our audience. Thank you, and everyone, and good night.
Ciao for now.
Luc, be well.
Thank you guys. You guys as well. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Luke.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye-bye.